Hey guys, my name is xOctoManx and this is a request of a Patreon about a tutorial how to create a nation select, character select menu with the possibility to change the name, or actually input a name and change the colors of an armor piece, for example, or the chassis of a car or whatever. So let's get started with that. At first I want to make sure that I have some nations I can select. So I have two FBX files for land 1 and land 2, and I will import them into my 3D models folder. As you can see, they land here. They don't have any colors, but I drag them into the scene so I can see them better. Also, I want to make sure that those two guys will have some materials on it, so I can tint them into red and green. So create some empty or new materials and then drag the colors on them. If you don't have any colors or want to use textures, you are free to do so. This is just for easing up stuff so I can see stuff better. Also, what I want to make sure that my camera is going to be a bit closer. In my game scene, I should see the position. And what I want to see is how big I want them, and I believe something about that. So maybe about Z-3 might be an okay-ish number. Also, what I want to do is I want to drag them up a bit so I can see them also better and have some space under them for some buttons if I need to, maybe like a back button. And in the top, I have the possibility to enter some text values and so on, and see them. So what I also want to do is I want to rotate them a bit so they get some depths, because that are 3D objects, and I want to make sure that they are looking like 3D objects. Everything else doesn't really matter. Also, when I have boss selected, as I already have, I go to add component and add a mesh collider component. If I disable the mesh renderer, you will see that there is a very complex concave mesh collider on them, but since it's taking a lot of calculations with mesh colliders, I want to make sure that I use convex on them, so they will be pretty preemptive. But we don't need anything else or more than just that. So I enable the mesh render component actually once again. As you can see, everywhere where that box or that mesh collider will be, I am able to select them. So before I go into coding, I want to make sure that I animate my camera to all my needs, and also I make sure that I create some platforms where my characters later on will stay or stand on. So I need some sockets to create with some parameters like cylinders and so on. So I'm able to rotate them around and so on and so forth. Okay, so select main camera right now and make sure that the far clipping planes is not higher than 30. Why am I going to change them to 30 is when I animate that camera away from them, because I want a zooming effect. As you can see, after a while, in this case after 30 meters I believe it is, those will disappear on the screen. So I can use that to make sure that they're invisible after a given amount of moving away the camera. So what I want to do is when the game starts, or when I press the start button, I want to zoom in the camera from minus, I don't know, 32 maybe. So I am not seeing them, and then I slide to the particular point of -3 in the Z axis. And yeah, let's go and create that. I go to the animation, and with the main camera selected, I create a new animation clip into my animations folder. So I go to my character select tutorial, in this case assets, and there I have an animations folder. And this animation will be a zoom to nation. I could just call it like this. You can, or nations. You can call that whatever you want. Just make sure that naming convention is very important for future projects and for the other things too. So now the record button is going to be active on that and can drag around everything I want to. And since this position is going to be my goal position, we have to change something later on. So what I want to do is, at first I could go and add a property of transformation, or I go to a point where I want my animation to have to. So I take the timeline and that red bar and drag this to 1 second. This is 1 second in here. And now I drag the camera to at least this point where the continents are not visible anymore. So I drag them out and maybe to this point. This is going to be about -32 of the Z-axis. So I can also go and type this values in. But since it's going to be the start point, I need to take those keys and drag them to the beginning and drag that keys to the end of the timeline. So wherever I want them to have. So I'm gonna select all of them and drag this to 0 and drag those to 1 second. Make sure that this bar in here is a light gray, so it's not that darkish. This will happen when you're not dragging around that inside the keyboard and the keys, in that dope sheet. Then this will not update, so you will have later on problems. Make sure that the whole timeline is going to be light gray. Otherwise, again, you will have serious problems. Okay, so now we have the -3 and we have the -32 on the z-axis, but also I want to have two platforms where my characters can be on. So what I can do is I can go to the top mode or by pressing on the y-axis, and when I have that, or I just remember the -3 in here, and I go to -32. What you can see again, those nations are not visible, but at that point I know I can create game objects like a cylinder for my platforms, which are later on rotating. And then when we are at that point, I go over and create them on the left and on the right, so they are not in the frustum of the camera itself. Okay, so let's go and create them. In this case, I want to create a cylinder. I don't want that to be a child of the camera, so I drag this one out again. And what I also want to make sure is that this platform is kind of big and fills up the screen kind of okayish. So at first I go over and scale the cylinder down, so it's a bit flat, or a bit more flat, maybe like this. And also drag from the middle again a bit, and now pull that away from the camera until I can see that. As you can see, it is not really what we want. I want to make sure that's at 0, so I can see that at the bottom over here. So I can go over and drag this a bit into the direction of the camera until it fits my needs. I can also go over and change the color to green and red later on. And now what I want to make sure is, when I again look from the very top, that I drag this outside of the frustum of the camera. So when I select the camera, I can see the frustum. I can also select the cylinder, but I cannot move that. So what I want to make sure is that in the game view, this cylinder is not visible anymore. And a bit more, so maybe we cannot have any problems later on when we are having a bit wider screens or anything. You see, I work on a 16:10 screen right now. So make sure everything works and we'll fit that. Okay, with that position, you can see there's a X position of -8.585. So I copy that value, go to cylinder, select it, press Ctrl D to duplicate that. And what I can do is I can just delete the minus in front of the numbers, and I will have the complete opposite of the field in here. Now I can select both of those cylinders and deactivate or remove the mesh collider on it, or the capsule collider, because we don't need them. Okay, now let's head back and bring our camera to -3 once again, since we have to animate this again to the positions of those two platforms. So we go again to the window animation, make sure main camera is selected, and go to nations or zoom to nations and create a new clip. This clip is going to be show nation 1, or whatever you want to call it. So this maybe is for the green nation, which is currently nation 1. And now we can go over and animate that. So select the record button over here and move the camera, or at first go to the on the timeline to maybe 0.30 and change the y-axis, the z-axis in the transform to -32. So now we will create a keyframe on that position, because we have changed something. And also from that point we go over to maybe 0.45. You can always go over and create more or do that faster or slower. And from this point I want to make sure that I drag this one to the left. so that is kind of centered in the camera, and it's from the left and from the right the difference is about the same. As you can see, we have now the X position of minus 8.85, and we will copy that value and we'll use that later on for the other cylinder. So now I can go over and deactivate that record button once again and create another clip and call this one Show Nation 2. Like this. Gonna save. Now in this clip again we go to 0:30, move the camera to minus 32 on the Z-axis, go to the 45 or 0.45 and move the X position to plus 8.85. So the red cylinder will be shown or seen in the game view. Okay, deactivate the record button and close the animation window. From this point we have the possibility in the animator window. If you don't see that in here, which usually you don't, make sure that you go to Window, Animator. When it is not docked in here, you can always drag that and put that behind or next to the scene view if you want to work with that like this. So you will not have any problems in here. So from our zoom to nations, or before we zoom into nations, we need to have an idle state. And this idle state is basically something which is not looping around. Okay, what we need to create is an idle state also for our zoom into the nation. So what we do is, again, we go select the main camera, go to create new clip, and this clip will be our zoom to nations idle. Save that. And once I'm in, I press or select that record button once again, and as I know the zoomed out Z value is going to be minus 32, I just change that value to minus 32 on that idle state, and I don't need to do anything else. So this will idle on minus 32 and will not do any animations at that point. So what I also want to make sure is that this, when you have opened the animator window, is the layer's default state. So select this one to default state and make a transition to zoom to nations. This zoom to nations is not going to be loopable. So I double click that or go into my animations list and select this one here and go over and deselect loop time. So it's not looping and whenever it's come to that point. Same for show nation and show nation 1 and show nation 2. I disable show nation 1's loop time and show nation's 2 loop time. Also, what I want to make sure is that I create 2 more transitions in here, or actually everyone needs a transition. So right click on one of those points in here or states and make a transition from one to each other. You can drag around them wherever you want and however you want. So now we need something to trigger those different animations. So the first one is going to be, we select a small plus over here in the parameters list and create a trigger. So this trigger is called show nations, for example. Show nations. So when this trigger is called, I want to make sure that I go from the idle state to the zoom to nations state. So what I do is I select that create a transition, and on the right I can enter some conditions. What I want to make sure is that show nations is in the conditions list. So when conditions is going to be triggered, then I want to show zoom nations, or basically play the zoom nations animation. Since there was no or is no other condition like show nation 1 or show nation 2, I want to add 2 more triggers for now. So the first trigger again is going to be show nation 1. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but naming convention is pretty important later on. Again, show nation 2. And what we can do is, since this is nation 1 we want to show, I hope it is named correctly. If not, we need to rename that later on. I want to set another condition for this one, so this will have the condition of show nation 1. And on this we will go over and choose the trigger to show nations. Oh, only one. Show nations in here. Same for the other side. we want to show nation 2, and on the back transition we want to say show nations, but only once. Okay, and going back to here, this transition may need another trigger like show main menu. So I'd create another one, show main menu. Okay, I better rename that. It's a small s. Okay, so and now I set this transition back to the main menu, basically to show main menu. Okay, now everything is should be set up for the main navigation of the camera. So when I trigger right now the show nations, you can see it will automatically zoom into that position and will stay since it has no looping state. When I now activate nation 1, I zoom away and show that, as you can see, that that first nation. Now I should be able to go back to show nations. So as you can see, it's driving back to that point, and I should also be able to show nation 2, as you can see, with that trigger, and again go back to show nations. And I should also be able to show the main menu, so it will just zoom out and will stay in that idle position. The only thing is it's going to take a while. So what I want to make sure that this transition has no exit time, and also this transition has no exit time. This will have no transition time or has exit time, and this too. So I don't have to wait until one of that are pretty much done, actually. Okay, so what we can do now, again, we show the nation, we can show nation 2, and again we can go back to say show nation 1 and show nation 1. Since we are not able to trigger show main menu from this point, we need to go back to the show nations first and then go back to the main menu. Okay, so now since we have the movement around that small menu, we are able to start coding for that movement, or basically for that camera. So when we are selecting one of those continents, we want to make sure that we can easily navigate around. We will make sure that we create a script first. So I'm gonna create a new script folder in my assets folder in here. So create folder scripts. And in this I'm gonna create a new C# script, and I call this one main menu handler, for example. You can name that whatever you want. So open up main menu handler in MonoDevelop or Visual Studio if you use that, or any other program interface, I don't know. And once MonoDevelop is going to open, then we create some variables. The first one and the most important one is public of type animator, which is sitting directly on our main camera, and call this one just anim. Nothing else is needed because we need to drag in all the informations in here. Later on we also will have some panels which we are basically creating and turning on and off when we are clicking on several things. Okay. What we also need to do is we need to take care of blocking some raycasting, and we are using raycasting to shoot a ray to that nations we are going to select to determine what we have selected, basically, or what we have created. So what I also want to make sure is I want to prepare everything. So what I want, or what I need, is a ray, and I call this one ray, and I also need a raycast hit, and call this one just hit. So those are other two variables we are going to use in just a second. Also, I want to create one bool which I can later on track if we are hitting GUI or not. And this is going to be just a private bool. We don't need to track anything of that. So private bool, and I call this one raycast block. This is just needed that we are able to block raycasts, or actually block raycast through GUI elements. Otherwise we would have some problems actually. Also, to use that raycast blocking, we are using one namespace, and this is going to be called using Unity Engine .event systems, since we are using event systems to trigger that. Okay, so with that done, we can go to our update function, which is basically holding all the raycasting informations. and we create our raycast, our raycast function in here. So the first thing is, if somebody is going to click the left mouse button or using a touch input, basically both are working. So input, so if input does dot get mouse button down, and then in brackets 0. So if anyone is going to press the left mouse button, or actually doing one touch on a touch screen, then we want to check if we are not getting blocked by a raycast. I go over this later on. So if not raycast block, then again we open and close some curly brackets. Whoops. And in here I want to shoot my ray directly from the point of the camera to the mouse position. So how can we do that? Actually, we set our ray to camera dot main, which is our main camera in this case, dot screen point to ray, and this point is going to be input dot mouse position. So now we have the ray, and we stored that ray from, again, we shoot the ray out of the camera onto the mouse position or the touch position in this case. It depends on what we are going to need or use later on. So, and now we want to check if that raycast has hit something. So if physics.raycast, and now in brackets we can type in ray, comma, out, hit. So if we are hitting something, we want to check what the hell are we hitting. And the first we want to check is if the hit, so whatever the object was, and if the hits.transform.tag, so we will tag our land areas in just a second, is going to be equal to whatever we call it, let's say continent 1. So if it's a green continent, then we want to react to it, and that means we want to call another function we will just create soon. And also I want to check if it's not that, but another one. So basically what we do is we copy and paste the whole if statement in here. Copy, paste, and in this case it's going to be continent 2. So, and when we are going to hit one of those continents, we will create those tags pretty quick. So we go to our, whatever land area we want. Land 1 in this case is a green one. That's pretty cool. So I go to the tag system on the right side, add tag, click on the plus and create a new tag. And this is going to be, as I said, continent 1. Also create another plus, or another tag, and say continent 2. If you're unsure, copy and paste them later on so you don't have any typos. So if anything is not working, check if everything is written correctly. Okay, so after we are leaving that update function, we want to trigger all that stuff from these positions in here, from that raycast, and also go back and use anything we need and want. Okay, so the first one is going to be a public variable, a public function of type void, and what I want to trigger is I want to trigger show nation. So we call this function just show nation or show nations. So we will see the first two continents when we are going to activate this. So what we do is we say anim.setTrigger, and this trigger is going to be a string variable. So we need to type this in brackets and into quotes. And now we go to the animators just for a second and see how we called that. And as you can see, the trigger is called show nations with a big N. So make sure you type this correctly, otherwise it's not working. So show nations. Okay. Also, we want to trigger panels in here in just a second, but for now we just want to make sure that everything works or is correctly. So the next one is another public function, and this is going to be, no typos, again of type void, and we want to show the main menu when we are calling this function. And this is going to be another trigger we have to set. So copy this line over in here, and this is going to be called show main menu, as you can see over here. So, and again, we need to copy that 2 times, but not just the trigger. We take the whole functions in here, so 1 and 2, and this is going to be show nation 1. So in here, once again, the correct trigger name, show nation 1, and show nation 2. Okay, so when everything is set up correctly, we should be able to trigger all of that forms. And now we can also say if continent 1 got hit, then we want to call the function show nation 1. So we can copy that part in here and place this one into there. And the same can be done in here. But instead of nation 1, we call the function show nation 2. Of course, we need to rename the second function. Oops. Copy, paste, and this is going to be nation 2. Don't forget to save the whole script. There should be no error at this point. And also, I want to create the panels we are going to create, or actually placeholders, and then we have the possibility to drag them all in. So what we need is, again, a public. Inside it's going to be a game object, and we call this one menu panel. The next one is going to be also public, with a P, of course. Public game object, and this is the nations panel. I will explain that in just a second. And we also need 2 more. So another game object, and this is nation 1 panel, maybe. And the other one, oh, it's not the nation. Well, let's just call it like this. Again, it doesn't really matter. And game object nation panel, nation 2 panel. Okay, so when we are showing the nations, we want to make sure that the main menu panel, for example, is inactive. So what we can type in here is menu panel or main menu panel, menu panel dot set active. It's going to be in brackets, and we type in there false. So this is not going to be visible at that point. But what we know is when we are showing the nations, that the nations panel is going to get the set active to be true. So nations panel dot set active to be true. And we can also take that with the nations panel 1 and 2. So nations panel 1 is going to be set active to be false. So I'm gonna copy over that and copy the whole line once again. And instead of nation panel 1, I'm gonna change this one to 2. Gonna save again. Now I can copy that whole part. And again, in show main menu, so the main menu should be true in this case, but the nations panel should be false. Whoops. Again, we will go over and copy the same stuff here once again. So nations panel is going to be false, but nations 1 panel is going to be true. And in the very last one, nations panel is going to be false, and nations panel 2 is going to be true. Okay, that's it for the main menu handler completely. So now we need to set up everything inside and where we want to place that main menu handler. And usually it doesn't really matter where we place that. We can create a new empty game object, for example, and call this one menu handler. And now we can drag that script we just created and drag this onto that menu handler game object. This can be at any position, so maybe we just go over and reset that. What I also want to make sure is that, again, my lands are tagged. So go to land 1 and tag this one with continent 1, and my land 2 is going to be continent 2. Okay, so back to the main menu handler. Now we need the animator component, which sits directly on the main camera. So I just go over and drag this one into the corresponding slot of anim. Now I need menu panels and nations panels, and those panels will basically make sure that we have enough buttons to navigate through. Okay, so in the scene view, I go over and select the 2D mode, zoom out a bit and go to my hierarchy panel and press right-click UI and create a canvas. So on this canvas, we will be able to see everything. Also, what I want to make sure, since we are going to create maybe stuff for mobile, I want to make sure that the canvas scaler is set to scale with screen size. I don't need to change anything else in here. So now I can create some buttons and some panels for our, for everything we need. So at first go to UI and create a panel. So this panel is maybe too big, I don't know, but for the main menu, for example, it's not bad that it is too big, since we need to block raycast, as I said before. So I call this one main panel. And this main panel will get one button, which is going to be my start game button. I can place this wherever I want to. I just give it another text like start game, or anything else you please and need. Okay, and then now I just leave it alone at that point. The only thing is I need an on-click event on that start button. And what I do is I drag now in my main menu handler into that slot and can now call a public function from the main menu handler script. So what I want to do is when I press that start button, I want to make sure that I show nations. So I can trigger show nations once I click over to that. So it will automatically disable the main menu panel and including the button, and we will zoom in to that particular point. Also, when you're unhappy with the image background because it's so not nice, go over and deactivate the alpha channel. Then you can have any image behind, or you just create your own background in here. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to create 3 more panels. So we go to UI panel, and what I want to do is I want to just copy and paste them all over. So I create a small button in here, and the first button is going to be a back button. I place this maybe on the anywhere I want, maybe here. And also I can make sure that the button's text is going to be always to best fit, so it's going to be resized pretty big. And also I want to make sure that the color of the button's text is going to be fully black, and the same for the start button in here, for the start button text. So this text is going to be our nations panel. And this button basically just will send us back to the main menu. So I just call this one back. But I don't want to add anything at the moment to it. I can open the slot already for any on-click event. So what I can do right now is I can duplicate this 3 times or 2 times. So the first one is going to be this. So this will be our nation 1 panel, and now I copy this once again or duplicate that, and this is going to be our nations 2 panel like this. Gonna save that into your scene already, so don't forget to save often. And this panel again does not need any color or anything else except you want that, but usually you don't, because you will need to see all of your backgrounds thingies behind that. So now we have all back buttons and so on and so forth. This button is still not renamed, so I renamed it very quick once again. Again, naming convention is very important. Okay, so what we can do now is we can basically deactivate them all, or we do that by script later on. But for the sake of doing all right, for the moment we activate all of them depending on what we need. So the first one is the nations panel, so I can activate that for a second and take that button. And now again I drag in the menu handler script, go to main menu handler, and what I want to do is I want to show the main menu when I select the nations panel back button. So I go back with the animations and stuff and will be back on the main menu panel. So now I can deactivate that once again. If I am on the button nations panel 1, Then I want to make sure when I press that back button that I am taking again the menu handler and call the Show Nations button. Yeah, the Show Nations panel, I mean, and activate, of course, the correct functions. And the same for the second panel. So go to the button again, drag in the menu handler, main menu handler script, and now Show Nations once again. So now we have all our back buttons. So drag in all the panels we need into the main menu handler. So we have main menu, nations panel, nation 1 panel, nation 2 panel inside, in the corresponding spots. So there you can see we get that zoom, and we can also go back, zoom out, and can press the start button once again. Now we should be able to send a raycast to the screen and maybe select the red one. And then as you can see, we already got to our red factions or nation, red nation cylinder, and we can do the same for the green one, and can repeat that the whole time. Pretty cool. And that's that part for the main navigation for now, and in the next part I will go over and cover the rest, like the rotations for the characters and all the other things. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumbs this video up if you like it, and feel free to become my patron or donate by using PayPal to support me and my channel in the future. All links will be below in the description. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.